It is Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020, and this is an update on the status of the Three Gorges Dam and the happenings around China. We have 4 pieces of information to cover today, including China lifts flood control emergency response in Yangtze River Basin. Also, courtesy of Reuters, China's looming corn shortage fans food security unease. Next, courtesy of China Daily, Firefighter team honored for its role in rescues. We also have some new photos and some new footage. Let's hop into it. And a brief caveat before today's video. While researching for these reports, I come across information from various sources. Just because I decide to include a piece of information doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with it. I like to let you decide for yourself. Moving on. And a quick look at the status of the water level at the Three Gorges Dam before we get started. The current water level at the Three Gorges Dam is 160.07 meters. That's up from yesterday's 159.18 meters. The current outflow is listed at 29,000 cubic meters per second. That's down from yesterday's 31,400 cubic meters per second. The current inflow is not noted, and it is worth noting that these numbers are released by the CCP. And one quick piece of interesting information before we get started. The following tweet supports the video footage we've seen this week that show parts of Sichuan being inundated with water for over 30 days. I'll read it. Flooded houses in many places destroyed tens of thousands of people in Anhui, soaked in water for 40 days without rescue. Recently, many places were hit by heavy rains. Floods and mudslides destroyed power lines and hydrological station railings, and houses were destroyed. Some areas were also flooded again, and mudslides engulfed the highway. Even worse is the population of tens of thousands. No one has been rescued since 40 days of soaking in water. And this comes courtesy of Xinhua. China lifts flood control emergency response in Yangtze River Basin. China's state flood control and drought relief headquarters Wednesday lifted the level 4 flood control emergency response in the Yangtze River Basin as water levels retreated below the warning lines, according to the Ministry of Emergency Management. The move marked the end of 63 days of flood control emergency response in the Yangtze River Basin, which began on July 2nd. The water levels of main control stations of the Yangtze River, Huihe River, and Taihu Lake are all below warning levels, and no major risks have been observed in the main flood control projects, the ministry said in an online statement. Authorities in relevant regions are required to continue closely monitoring weather conditions and water level changes and strengthen inspection of reservoirs and embankments, also hydropower stations operating at high water levels. China has a 4-tier flood control emergency response system, with level 1 being the most severe. And this comes courtesy of Reuters. China's looming corn shortage fans food security unease. Soaring corn prices are stoking food security jitters in China, where food inflation has climbed to the highest level in over a decade, and President Xi Jinping made a recent high-profile plea for an end to wastage. The price surge in corn, critical for China's mammoth hog, dairy, and poultry sectors, is the latest in a series of ructions that include a devastating pig disease, pandemic-driven upsets for international suppliers, and warnings of a growing food supply gap. Prices have risen as the country heads for its first real corn shortfall in years in the upcoming 2020-2021 season starting in October. China could face a deficit of up to 30 million tons, around 10% of its total crop, say analysts and traders. That would be a likely boom for major exporters like the United States and Ukraine, but threatens to push up global prices and have a knock-on impact elsewhere as some corn users switch to other grains. It's certain that there will be a corn shortage in the future, and we would need to import a lot next year, said an executive with a state-owned trading firm who declined to be identified as he was not authorized to talk to the media. Maintaining food supplies is a major source of political legitimacy for the ruling Chinese Communist Party, but it has struggled to balance central planning with grain market forces. Struggling with bulging stockpiles, China 4 years ago abandoned a scheme that paid farmers above market prices for corn, and has since produced less of the grain than it consumes. The state stockpiles that supplement its supply are now nearly gone. Corn prices in Jiangsu, at the heart of China's grain basket, hit a 5-year high at 2,050 yuan a ton on August 26. That's up 27% since the start of the year, before edging down in recent days. This has contributed to a broader rise in food prices, also driven by severe flooding in the south, pockets of drought in the northern grain belt, and a continuing pork shortage. China expects a bumper 2020-2021 corn crop at around 266.5 million tons, but still not enough to meet demand, according to the Agriculture Ministry, which forecasts year-end stocks of minus 16.7 million tons. That shortfall could be up to 30 million tons, according to 5 analysts and traders surveyed by Reuters, far exceeding China's current import quota of 7 million tons, a figure that it has never filled. If the government does not loosen regulations regarding the import quota, we will be facing a huge shortage, said a Shanghai-based domestic agriculture products trader. Still, the need for imports is likely to be limited by substitution, given China's ample supplies of other staple grains as well as imports of other substitute grains like sorghum and barley. Based on the aggressive new crop buying we're seeing for U.S. corn, it seems increasingly likely China will raise the quota or make some changes, said Darren Friedrichs, a senior analyst at StoneX in Shanghai. Thank you for watching this video. If you're finding it informative, please consider giving the channel a subscribe. And this comes courtesy of ChinaDaily.com. Firefighter team honored for its role in rescues. A team of 1,075 firefighters has been honored as role models by the publicity department of the Communist Party of China for rescuing more than 13,000 people from flooding in Zhejiang, Jiangxi province. Chen Shua, a member of the Zhejiang Fire and Rescue Team that took part in flood relief along Poyang Lake in the province in July, said the disaster this year was more severe than the previous 6 flood rescues he participated in. On July 7th, Chen's team received phone calls from the city's 3 counties at nearly the same time asking for rescue assistance. Chen went to Gulao village, where flooding had submerged the first floors of residential buildings. He and other team members evacuated about 240 villagers from the buildings and brought them to shelters in the county with a motorboat that could hold 8 people at a time. It was the most challenging flood rescue task ever, Chen said. We could not work in rotations like before because the limited number of staff members went to several places at the same time. For nearly the whole month, Chen and his teammates worked for about 15 hours a day, and they consumed only bread and bottled water. The river current was as fast as 1.5 meters per second, double the previous flood flow speed on average, he said. Boats would be hit on the side and could not go straight across the river. I drove against the current and took a detour to arrive in the village. Chen used a rope to fasten the boat to the houses and a ladder to rescue the stranded villagers from roofs or second floors. Some people asked Chen to evacuate their belongings as well. Chen needed to persuade them to leave as soon as possible without wasting time. In swift currents, the boats had the risk of overturning, and we also needed to reassure frightened villagers that we would send them to safety, he said. We won't risk anyone's life, and for every task we prepare for the worst situation. Our team's goal is to achieve more efficiency under the premise of guaranteeing each rescuer's safety, he said. And our last piece of information is a series of interesting tweets. And I think that's a good place to wrap up today's video. I hope that you found it informative, and check back soon for more content.